Bleach doesn't wash out everything. Tara Ellison learned that the hard way, then stopped. Wait, let me start clean. Gunpowder has a smell that bleach can't touch, nor a hatch. I see the issue. Several names in the list match names I was about to use. Let me check silently and write directly. Gunpowder has a smell that no amount of hand sanitizer fully erases. It lives somewhere behind the sinuses, patient, waiting for the right quiet moment to remind you where you've been. Rowan Dix knew this. She'd known it for 7 years, 3 months, and an indeterminate number of nights spent staring at the acoustic ceiling tiles of Mercy Ridge Community Clinic, counting the small brown water stains the way other people count sheep. The clinic sat at the edge of a small Colorado town that existed primarily as a waypoint between larger places. One urgent care, one hardware store, one diner that closed at 8, and a Dollar General that never quite had what you needed. The kind of town where people recognized your truck before they recognized your face. Rowan had chosen it for exactly that reason. She worked the evening shift, 4 to midnight, Monday through Friday, occasional Saturdays when Dr. Ellery's sciatica flared up, which was often. The clinic handled the standard cascade of rural medicine: farm equipment lacerations, allergic reactions, a reliable wave of elderly patients managing chronic conditions, with the grim stoicism of people who'd outlasted most of what had already tried to kill them. Nobody arrived in pieces. Nobody arrived with a pulse of 60 and falling. It was slow work, methodical work, the medical equivalent of filing paperwork. Rowan was good at slow. She had practiced it like a second language until it felt almost native. She was 34, though the hollows under her eyes and the economy of her movements suggested someone who'd been 34 for a very long time. She wore her dark auburn hair pulled into a braid that she never bothered to tighten, so loose strands always fell across her left eye by mid-shift. She had a habit of tucking them back with the same hand that held her pen without ever looking up from whatever she was writing. The other staff thought she was focused. She was just somewhere else. Her scrubs were always a half size too large, olive green when she could get them, the same muted shade as a certain kind of vegetation in a certain kind of place she never named aloud. The other evening staff consisted of Benny, a 26-year-old medical assistant, who played acoustic guitar in a cover band on weekends, and who had never, not once, met a silence he didn't immediately try to fill, and Judith, the front desk coordinator, a woman in her late 50s, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and who had been running that front desk through 3 different clinic directors and somehow outlasted all of them. Judith knew everything about everyone in a 20-mile radius. She had a soft spot for stray animals and a particular talent for making patients feel expected. Rowan liked them both precisely because neither of them asked her anything that mattered. It was a Thursday in late October. Cold had settled into the valley the way it does at altitude. Not gradually, but all at once, like a decision. The parking lot outside the clinic windows was empty, except for Judith's sensible sedan and Rowan's 10-year-old truck with the cracked passenger side mirror she kept meaning to replace. Benny was at the back counter, eating chips from a vending machine bag, and explaining to nobody in particular the structural differences between finger-picking and flat-picking. Judith had gone home at 5. The last patient, an 8-year-old with an ear infection, and a very strong opinion about grape flavoring versus cherry, had left 40 minutes ago. The clinic was quiet. Rowan was at the supply cabinet doing inventory. It was not her job. The inventory was supposed to be completed by the day shift, but she did it anyway on slow evenings because counting things helped. Gauze pads, 42. Saline flushes, 19. Alcohol preps. She didn't bother counting those. She stacked them back neatly and moved to the next shelf. The front door opened. She heard it before Benny registered it. The soft electronic chime, and then the particular sound of the exterior cold rushing in, carrying the smell of pine and October and something underneath it. Something she couldn't identify immediately and that her nervous system flagged anyway. "We're about to close up," Benny called from the back, his voice carrying the automatic friendliness of someone who dealt with the public. "But come on in, we can still help you out." Rowan put down the box of gloves she was holding. She didn't move toward the door. She listened. One set of footsteps, uneven, a slight drag on the right side. She heard the soft, compressed exhale of someone managing pain. Then a second set of footsteps. Steadier, deliberate, flanking. She came around the corner of the supply hall into the front room. There were two of them. The first was a man somewhere in his mid-40s, lean in the way that suggested years of weight cycling between deployment and recovery. He was the one with the uneven gait. His right hand rested across his left forearm in a posture Rowan recognized, protecting something. His face was deeply weathered, the lines around his eyes, carved by sun and squinting at distance, not age. He wore a plain gray Henley and dark work pants and boots that had covered serious ground. The second man was younger, maybe late 20s, with the kind of physical stillness that reads to civilians as calm and reads to Rowan as trained. He had the door. He wasn't blocking it. He was just aware of it. Benny had come up behind her and was already smiling his easy smile, reaching for the intake clipboard. "Hey guys, what are we working with tonight?" The older man looked at Benny briefly, then past him. His eyes found Rowan. She felt it land. Not recognition exactly, more like a frequency. The particular silent acknowledgement that passes between people who have been in the same kind of dark. "We're not here for a walk-in," the older man said. His voice was level, slightly roughened. A voice that had given instructions in loud places. "We're looking for someone who works here. Night shift nurse. Goes by Dix." Benny turned to look at Rowan with the uncomplicated transparency of a person who had never needed to be otherwise. "That's her." "Yeah." "Who are you?" she said. It wasn't quite a question. The older man shifted his weight slightly off his right side. "Bastian," he said. "Corporal Marcus Bastian, 75th Ranger Regiment, retired." He nodded toward the younger man behind him. "That's Theo, Lieutenant Theo Grange, also retired." The supply room felt very far away. "Dix," Bastian said again, and the way he said it. Like a call sign, like a word that had been said in urgency, pulled at something in her chest. She kept carefully weighted down. "You have the wrong person," Rowan said. "We don't," Bastian said. He wasn't combative. He said it the way people state geography. "We've been looking for 2 years. Your file's buried pretty deep. Took us a while. Files get buried for a reason." Theo shifted slightly by the door. He hadn't said anything. He was watching her with an expression she recognized. The look of someone trying to hold something together through sheer steadiness of posture. Benny glanced between them with the expression of someone who had walked into the middle of a foreign film with no subtitles. I can go check the supply room," he offered. "Yes," Rowan said without looking at him. She heard his sneakers squeak away down the hall. The front room was very quiet. The fluorescent light above the intake desk buzzed faintly. Outside, the cold pressed against the glass. "How's the hand?" Rowan said, looking at the way Bastian held his arm. "It's nothing. It's not nothing." You've been favoring it since you walked in, and you're tensing through your shoulder to compensate. Old injury. Shrapnel, 2019. Are you here because of the hand? No. She looked at him, at the deep lines around his eyes, and the careful stillness of a man who had spent years moving through the world, trying to take up less of it than he actually occupied. She knew that posture from the inside. Then why are you here, Bastian? He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. She watched his hands. He pulled out a photograph and placed it on the intake desks between them. It was a Polaroid, old. The color slightly faded, the edges worn smooth. The image showed a vehicle, a tan tactical truck, one side completely destroyed. Standing beside it, barely visible against the dust and smoke, was a small figure in olive drab, with a medical bag already open. Rowan looked at the photograph for a long time without speaking. She remembered that day by its smell first, burning rubber and diesel. Then the particular sweetness of blood and heat, and underneath everything the alkaline dust of a country that had been at war. For so long the ground itself seemed to have given up. She had been 26 years old. She had been the only medic in range when the IED tore through the lead vehicle. She had stopped 2 arterial bleeds with her hands. She had packed a chest wound with gauze she ran out of and then improvised with what was available. She had performed a cricothyrotomy in the back of a vehicle that was still on fire on one side, using a scalpel she'd carried since her first deployment and a makeshift airway she assembled from what she had left in the bag. She had saved 3 of the 4 men in that truck. She had not saved Linares. She remembered Linares the way she remembered all of them. Not as a face that appeared when she closed her eyes, but as a physical sensation. The specific weight of a person when they stopped fighting. The way a hand goes heavy differently than it goes relaxed. You saved my life, Bastian said. His voice had lost its level quality. It cracked somewhere in the middle of the sentence, and he let it, didn't try to course correct. You saved Theo's. You saved Ortega's. And then you disappeared. I didn't disappear, Rowan said. I separated. You were a staff sergeant with a commendation pending. You were 26 years old. You walked out of Bagram with an honorable discharge and vanished. His jaw moved. We looked. Ortega looked for a year before his health got bad. Theo started after that. Rowan's eyes moved to Theo by the door. He was still holding his stillness like a structure, something load-bearing. How is Ortega? She said, a breath. Bastian's chest moved. He passed, he said, 14 months ago. Complications. He asked us before the end to find you, to tell you. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The cold pressed against the glass. Rowan stood very still. She had thought about Ortega sometimes. Not often. She had gotten good at not often. She thought about the way he'd laughed in the field, which was incongruous with everything else about him. A full, genuine laugh that had no business existing in the places they'd been. She thought about his hands, how large they were, how careful. He'd had 3 kids. She remembered him saying that. 3 kids and a wife who made tamales from scratch every Christmas. She had not let herself think about the possibility that he was gone. When? She said. August of last year. Bastian's voice was carefully modulated. Cardiac. His heart had been compromised since the blast. The doctors said it was always a matter of time. Rowan turned and walked to the window. She stood with her back to them, looking at the parking lot, at the flat amber light of the sodium lamp over her truck, at the dark line of pines at the edge of the property. She didn't cry. She didn't break. She just stood there and let the information settle into her because there was no other way to receive it. Why now? she said finally. Why look for me now? Theo spoke for the first time. His voice was younger than his face suggested, less roughened. Because Ortega asked us to. She turned back. Theo had moved from the door to the middle of the room. He was standing at a distance that was respectful and deliberate. She could see his face clearly now. He had the eyes of someone who had been through a long process and come out the other side of it. Not unmarked, but upright. He looked like he'd been working on something for a long time and was still working. He didn't want you to spend the rest of your life not knowing, Theo said. He talked about you. All three of us made it to our 40s because of what you did on that road. He wanted you to know that we didn't just survive, that we came back and we had time, real time. He paused. Ortega had 12 more years with his kids. He walked his oldest daughter down the aisle. He held his first grandkid. He said, Theo stopped. His throat moved. He said to tell you that he got to see all of it because of you, and that it counted. The supply room was silent. Benny had gone fully quiet somewhere at the back of the clinic, understanding in his uncomplicated way that this was not a moment for him. Rowan's hands were in her pockets. Her fists were clenched, her fingernails pressing crescents into her palms. I didn't get Linares, she said. Neither man spoke. I was the medic on that vehicle, and I didn't get him. She heard her own voice doing something she hadn't authorized, something rough and unstable. She looked at Bastian, forcing herself to hold his gaze. He bled out in my hands, Bastian. I had an artery clamped for 11 minutes and I lost pressure and I lost him. I've gone over that sequence every 6 months for 7 years trying to find the moment I made the wrong call, and I can never find it. Which is worse, somehow, which is worse. Bastian was quiet for a long moment. Linares had a liver laceration from the initial blast, he said. The trauma surgeon at Landstuhl confirmed it in the debrief. Even in an OR, even with a full team, it would have been, he stopped. Steadied. You didn't lose him. He was already lost. You just stayed with him so he knew someone was there. The buzzing overhead seemed to grow louder, then receded. Rowan looked at the photograph still sitting on the intake desk. The small figure in olive drab, barely visible, doing what needed to be done. She didn't remember feeling afraid in that moment. She had been afraid later, much later, alone in a bunk listening to other people sleep while she ran the numbers over and over. But in the moment, there had been only the problem and the solution and the gap between them that she was trying to close. She crossed to the desk and picked up the photograph. Ortega had this. He kept it the whole time, Theo said. He asked us to bring it to you. She turned it over. On the back, in a handwriting she didn't recognize, were 3 words. She came back. Not what she did, not what she saved. Just the fact of her presence, the fact of return. She stood there holding the photograph until she became aware of her own breathing. Bastian shifted again, the weight on his right side. We're not expecting anything, he said quietly. We weren't sure. Theo thought you might not want to be found. He was probably right. But we made a promise to Ortega. You should have the photograph, Rowan said. It was his to give, Bastian said. He wanted you to have it. A long silence. The cold, the fluorescent light. Somewhere at the back of the clinic, the very soft sound of Benny pretending to organize something. How's Theo's shoulder? Rowan said, not looking up from the photograph. Bastian blinked. Theo glanced down involuntarily, then back up. Excuse me. You've been rotating it slightly outward since you moved away from the door. Old rotator cuff or surgical repair that didn't fully hold. A long pause. Then very quietly, Theo said, Surgery, 2021. It's fine. It's not fine, Rowan said, her voice dropping back into its usual flat register. Come here. He crossed to her. She set the photograph down, pressed her thumb along the ridge of his shoulder blade while he stood very still, and found the adhesion point in about 12 seconds. He flinched. You need a physio. Referral, she said. Not a good one, a specific kind. Deep tissue work on the posterior capsule. If you've been compensating this long, you're going to start getting cervicogenic headaches if you haven't already. A beat. I have, Theo said. I know. She stepped back. I'll write you the referral. Give me a minute. She went to the prescription pad on the desk. Her pen moved quickly. She could feel both men watching her, and she let them, because it was easier to do something useful than to stand still with the photograph on the desk between them. She handed Theo the slip of paper. He took it carefully, like it was something that might not survive rough handling. The clinic's closed at 8, she said. You should find somewhere to eat. There's a diner at the south end of town. Nothing remarkable, but it's warm and the pie is decent. Dix, Bastien said. She looked at him. He had the photograph in his hands. He had picked it up from the desk while she was writing. He held it out to her. I already told you, she said. Keep it. He told us specifically, Bastien said, not to leave without you taking it. She stared at the photograph. The small figure in olive drab standing next to a burning vehicle with her bag already open, already working, already in motion before the dust had settled. 26 years old. A person who had not yet learned to be invisible, who had not yet built the careful, deliberate silence she now carried around inside her like ballast. She took the photograph. It was lighter than she expected. Just paper and chemistry, just light captured on a surface. But her hands felt it differently. Tell me about the grandkid, she said. Bastien looked up. Ortega's grandkid. Her voice was steady. Almost the one he got to hold. Tell me about that. And Bastien, who had spent 7 years carrying grief like a field pack and had never quite figured out how to set it down, did something she hadn't seen from him yet. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that had real mileage on it, the kind that knows what it cost. A girl, he said, born last spring. They named her after Ortega's mother. He had 4 months with her. Rowan nodded. She turned the photograph over and looked at the 3 words one more time. She came back. She slid it into the front pocket of her scrub top and felt it settle there, small and flat and solid against her sternum. Benny appeared cautiously around the corner of the hall, reading the room with the emotional intelligence of someone who had made most of his mistakes early and learned from them. He looked at Rowan. She gave him a small, barely perceptible nod. Diner closes at 8, he said helpfully. But if you want the pie, you gotta ask for it before 7:45 or Carla puts it away. Bastien looked at Benny for the first time with something approaching warmth. Noted. Good pie, Benny added. He said good pie, Theo said, the first trace of something lighter in his voice. They moved toward the door. Bastien went first. The same slight drag on his right side, the same careful economy of movement. Theo paused at the threshold and looked back at Rowan, and the look said something she didn't have words for and didn't need to. Some things close the loop without language. The door opened. The cold came in. The door closed. The electronic chime faded. Benny stood in the middle of the room, looking at the space where the 2 men had been. That was, he started, then stopped, because there was no sentence in his repertoire that fit. Lock up at midnight, Rowan said. I'm going to finish the inventory. She went back to the supply room. She stood in front of the shelf with her hand resting on the edge of the counter, not looking at anything, letting the particular silence of the clinic fill back in around her. The buzz of the fluorescent light in here was softer. The cold pressed at the small high window above the supply cabinet. Somewhere outside, a car started. She put her hand against the front pocket of her scrub top. Paper, thin, light, holding light. She had thought about Linares in this room, alone in the inventory quiet, every several months for 7 years. She had gone over the sequence. She had run the numbers. She had returned to the moment of pressure loss with the exactness of someone who believed that if she examined it closely enough, she would eventually find the failure. The thing she had missed, the decision that had cost him. She had never found it because it wasn't there to find. She was 34 years old. She had spent 7 years becoming invisible in a small Colorado town, counting gauze pads and managing ear infections, and learning to sleep through most of the night. She still had the dreams sometimes. Not nightmares exactly, more like dispatches from the same location, the dust and the diesel, and the sound of a helicopter that was always arriving too late. She had made her peace with the dreams the way you make peace with weather. You don't stop it, you dress for it. But she had not until tonight. Let herself think about Ortega walking his daughter down an aisle. She had not let herself count the years he had gotten. 12 years. 4 months with a grandchild. Tamales at Christmas. The sound of his laugh in a place where laughter had no business existing. She pressed her palm flat against her pocket. She didn't need the photograph to remember the road. She had the road memorized, every second of it, in detail she had never asked for and could not return. But the photograph was something different. It was evidence of something she had not been able to fully believe for 7 years. That it had mattered, not the record of it, not the commendation that was never processed, the act itself, the returning, the staying, the hands doing what hands could do, that it had been enough. She took a breath, let it out slowly. She picked up the clipboard and went back to the inventory. Saline flushes, 19. Gauze pads, 42. Alcohol preps, she'd count them this time. The fluorescent light hummed. Outside the window, the October dark pressed in around the clinic. And somewhere to the south, in a diner at the edge of a small town that was a waypoint between larger places, a man with a careful gait was asking about pie. Rowan counted. Her hands were steady,